Hi everyone, welcome to our spring cookie decorating class. My name's Denise, I'm the owner of D is for Delicious, and I'm so happy to have you here today. So today we're gonna work on some spring themed cookies, and before we dig into our kit, I'd love for you to grab a few things. First of all, get a pair of scissors. We're gonna need that to trim our piping bags. Some toothpicks would be great, super helpful tool. Some paper towels or napkins, and then something to work on. I put a piece of parchment paper on my table, but if you have a tablecloth, wax paper, a cookie tray, any of those items would be great. And make sure you wash your hands because we're gonna be handling our cookies a lot. So in your kit that you have, there are some things that I'd like you to get out. The sprinkles we can come back to later. There are 4 colors of piping bags that we're just going to set aside. Don't trim those quite yet. We're gonna trim those together. We have 6 different cookies, all different designs. We also have a practice sheet. Set that in front of you now, please. And we have some extra piping bags for rebagging our icing a little bit later. So take out those items and you can just save your box to store your cookies in later and set your box aside. All right, so with the practice sheet, I find that even if you've done 100 cookie classes or no cookie classes and no experience, it's super helpful to practice before you work on your cookies. So it's good to practice the technique and how the icing flows. And so that's what I'd like to show you. So when we trim our bags, we just trim off a little bit to start with. It's always easier to snip off a little bit more. So just start with a little small snip and you can always trim more if it doesn't come out well. With the hand that you write with, your dominant hand, I want you to put that at the top of your bag. And then with your other hand, I just want you to help guide it along. So what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to cover up the lines with the icing. I'm squeezing just very gently. And when you come to the end of the line, the way you can stop is to release pressure and pull up. That's kind of all in one fluid motion. It takes some practice. Push down and pull up. I guess it's 3 things happening at once. You release pressure, you push down, and you pull up. So if your icing is not coming out smoothly right now and it's not covering the line completely, you may just have trimmed your bag a little too small. So maybe trim off just a bit more, just so it covers the black line completely. You'll notice as I go, my piping bag is not touching the surface. It's not touching the paper. My piping bag is hovering above maybe like a ½ inch, ¼ of an inch or so. And the icing just follows along. Work at whatever pace feels comfortable to you. And you'll find as you go through this, you're just going to feel more and more comfortable as you work. It's like our warm-up. All right, on to circles. Circles are a challenging shape to do. Just keep that hand moving. I like to do mine in a clockwise motion. As a righty, that works well for me. If you're left-handed, you may want to see what feels comfortable for you. Maybe the opposite direction would feel best. Let's end with some hearts. Are you noticing that it's a little bit easier to follow the different shapes as you get closer to the end? I hope you're feeling warmed up. This was just for practice, so we can set this aside when we're done. That way your sleeve doesn't go in it and you don't get icing all over yourself. And if you're still working, you can press pause so that you can make sure you take your time in practice. All right, so now for the cookies. Let's cut open these cellophane bags and get our cookies out. See if you can recognize the shapes. We've got a bird, we've got a birdhouse, we've got a flower. Now this one here, we sometimes use it for fireworks, but today we're gonna use it to make a bouquet of flowers on. And we have a butterfly and a rainbow. Oh, I love spring. All these colors are so happy. All right, so when we decorate cookies, we divide this into 3 separate steps. The first step is to outline them. The second step is to flood them. And the third step is to detail them, where we put on all the cute touches. So I'm going to have you arrange your cookies in a certain way because some of them are going to be a little bit more challenging than others. Okay, let's start with the butterfly, bird, and rainbow closest to our bodies. We're gonna start with outlining those and then move on to the other 3 cookies. So we've trimmed off 1 bag of icing. Let's get our other bags trimmed. Snip off just a little bit. I always like to trim the bag away from the cookie so that plastic tip doesn't go right onto my cookies. We wanna eat cookies, not plastic. Okay, so we have that trimmed. We've got our supplies all ready. So I am going to use certain colors for the cookies I'm going to outline, but please use creative freedom. If you want to choose a different color to use, go for it. Do whatever you like, whatever feels happy and comfortable for you. There's some great options to use. So on the butterfly here, I am going to outline the whole butterfly right now, 1 solid color. I am going to follow the outline of the cookie, and I'm going to try and put my line as close to the edge of the cookie without going over. And I'm just following along. If any of your line doesn't work out the way you like it, you can just scrape it off with a toothpick and start again. It's really easy to fix any mistakes right now because the icing is wet and it's so easy to remove with a quick swipe of the toothpick. You could just scrape it off and start again. But for now on my butterfly, that's all I'm gonna do right now. I'm gonna leave him be and I'm gonna move on to the bird. So on the bird, the only part I'm not going to outline is the beak. I'm gonna leave that alone. So I like to start there. That way I don't forget. And I'm just going to follow along the shape. All of the cute features that will make this look like a bird later are going to happen in the detailing phase. There we go. And that's as far as I'm going to do that one. So on the rainbow, I like to make the rainbow 1 solid color in the background and then add some lines for the different like rays and give it a little bit of character. So all along the rainbow, and I can see I did not trim my bag wide enough, so I'm just gonna stop and swipe, snip a little bit more. It's really easy at this stage to just start fresh when you know you're not happy with something. So since these cookies are wet, I'm not going to handle the outside edge. I'm just gonna push them up to the top row. I'm gonna move these cookies closest to me because I have better control when they're closer to my body, okay? So on the flower, let's bring in some of this peach color. This little spot here is going to be a leaf, so I'm not going to outline that portion. Let me show you. So I kind of am just swooping in there to just give it more of like a petal effect. And then I'm going to use my green to outline the leaf. And it'll look more leafy later. The birdhouse. Okay, this one I just love. So I'm going to make a few different parts on this birdhouse. I'm going to first give it a roof. And I'm just making some color choices. Please feel free to do the same or use whichever ones you'd like. So I am going to make it so that it's just a thin area of a roof line. Okay, and then I better make the base right now. So down below, I'm just gonna make a little trim, little layer for the base of the birdhouse. All right. Oops, it looks like I forgot this one spot. Anytime you want icing to stay in a certain area, you have to be sure it has a border on all sides. And that one almost didn't. Okay, so now I'm going to make my birdhouse white. So I'm just going to give a border, an outline, on all the places where I don't want my icing to escape from. Especially this hole in the middle. There we go. So I've covered up all of the edges of this cookie, and that is where I'm going to stop with the birdhouse. And then with this one here, we're going to turn this into a flower bouquet. So the way that I like to do that is to create just a white space in the background. So we can actually draw flowers on later. So we're just going to follow along the outline, creating an area where some artwork can come to life. And my friends, that is the first step of our cookie class. That is our outlining stage. Okay, so let's move on to step 2, which is flooding. So I am going to move my cookies around. Again, the ones that I started with have dried a little bit more. I'm gonna bring those closer to me. I'm handling them very, very carefully because this icing is still wet. So, starting with our butterfly, we are gonna move on to the flooding stage. Now, at this point, we can make a choice to trim our bags just a little more if we want it to come out a little bit quicker. So what I like to do is when I start flooding, I like to get a feel for how the icing's coming out. I like to not trim the bag if I can avoid it, because that way I can have it for like smaller spaces. I know on my birdhouse, I have a roof line to do, and so I don't want to trim my bag too much. But if your bag is trimmed on the smaller side and your icing just isn't coming out fast enough, why don't you trim off just a little bit more of your icing bag? And then when you're flooding, there's really no rhyme or reason to this. You're just squeezing the piping bag at the top. You're applying your pressure at the top. That way you don't have a volcano of icing to erupt on you. And you're just getting out a lot of icing onto the cookie. And either with the tip of your bag, you start to gently push it up to the outline, or this is where the toothpicks really come in handy because they can help you to be more precise. I gently push the icing up. I'm looking at the top of my cookie to make sure there's no cookie peeking through. And just go all around the cookie, gently pushing up that icing to the border. There we go. Now we do have some sprinkles that we can use. I'm going to show you where I'll use them a little later, but if you would like to use sprinkles, just keep in mind that sprinkles stick to wet icing. So if that's something you want to do on any cookies, feel free to do that. and make any creative choices you would like along the way. I'm going to move on to flooding the bird. Again, I think my icing is coming out just enough that I'm not going to trim it anymore. If you do trim it, that's absolutely fine. I will show you how you can rebag your icing later. That's why I included some extra piping bags for you, so that when we get to the detailing stage, you can rebag your icing and have a nice fine tip to work with again. So the key here is just to get a lot of icing out. You want your icing to come out pretty thick so that there are no thin spots on your cookie. And I get a lot on, and then I take a toothpick and do the finishing touches. So one thing to mention, in case you are noticing that any of your cookies are starting to have a waterfall of icing coming over the side, no worries. Here's what that means. It means that just a little too much icing was put onto the cookie, and the best thing to do, honestly, is to let it go, because it's easier to just scrape it off after it dries and crusts over a little bit than to worry about it while it's flowing. So let gravity do its thing, and then you can scrape it off a little bit later. So I'm done with my bird. I'm gonna move on here to the rainbow, and I'm just gonna flood the whole background white, and then I'm going to add the different bands of color and some different details. I'll do that in the detailing stage. So I find this to be such a fun stage of cookie decorating. It's quiet, you can just kind of relax and get lost in your thoughts. I hope that you're finding the same to be true. And you're gonna have a delicious outcome in the end. This is a big cookie, so we're getting a lot of white icing on this one. I always wipe off my toothpick before I use it if it has another color on the end. It's not the end of the world if you get a different color on your cookie, but if you can avoid it, why not? Now, if at any time you notice your icing isn't quite smoothing out the way it did on the others, you can always do this too. You can tap it very gently with the side of the cookie and just tap it on the surface a few times. It just settles it right down. Look how smooth and shiny they are. All right, so let's shuffle our cookies around. I am not going to handle these freshly flooded cookies. I'm going to use my finger and just push it up above. I want those to start crusting over and dry. Okay, so this flower cookie here, I'm gonna just start with the flower portion, and I'll do my leaf after. Doesn't matter if you do your leaf first or second. We're just flooding in these areas now. And if at any point I'm working too fast, or you are a little bit behind or want to listen to something again, please just feel free to pause it and go back to that information. I wish we were here in person together so I could hear your questions. I always love to see everyone doing this part and see the colors they've chosen. I hope you'll share your pictures at the end with me. I love to see finished work. It's always so exciting. All right. Just a few little areas to smooth out here. Be sure to look at the top of your cookie. It's very easy to miss any spots at the top of the cookie especially. So you really have to peek over. And then I'm going to fill in the leaf. These colors together are so soothing. I just love them. All right, birdhouse. Oh my gosh, speaking of birdhouses. So I'll tell you the story while I fled. I'm just gonna pick any spot to start with. So why don't I do the roof and the base first, and then I'll move into the birdhouse part. So birds. Birds are busy right now building nests. And on our deck, we literally have 3 bird nests being built. And my husband kind of doesn't love that, but I kind of do because I think it's so fun to watch all the action. Birds are amazing to see what they build with their hands. I'm sorry, not hands, their claws and their beaks. I think it's so fascinating. Nature is pretty cool. Okay, so I did the top and the bottom. If you want to add any sprinkles, maybe pretend this is pollen. I'm going to pretend this is pollen right now. I am going to just sprinkle a little pollen on my birdhouse because I think there's a lot of pollen in the air. I know we could use this as snow, but I'm not going to talk about snow. I'm going to talk about pollen. Oh, that's cute. We're going to save our eyeball for later. I bet you can guess where that's going. So we're going to push these extra little sprinkles that escaped. I'm going to push those back on my birdhouse roof. There we go. And then on the birdhouse, I'm going to give this birdhouse a little bit of a pattern. And the way I'm going to do that on this birdhouse is I'm going to show you a little something called marbling. And maybe you've done this before in other cookie classes. I always try to find a cookie that we can incorporate this on because it's just a fun technique. So I'm first just going to smooth out my icing, make sure it's covering up all the cookie. And marbling. The way we're going to do this is while this icing is wet, it does have to be wet. I couldn't go back to any of my other cookies and do this right now. I would have to only do it on my wettest, freshest cookie. So I'm going to take another color. I think I'm going to choose blue since I haven't done that. I'm going to take that blue and I'm going to make some stripes with it. Okay? So I'm just going to start at the top. My lines don't have to be great, but I'm just going to space out some lines. Okay? Don't worry if your lines aren't perfect. So you're going to take a toothpick. You're going to start at one side and you're imagining just the down. I know this shape is a little bit funny because it's not completely squared off on the edges. So we're just going to take our toothpick and drag it down and up all the way across the cookie. And you'll notice that it leaves behind this really neat pattern in the back. It blends the two colors together and just gives it this simple effect, and that's called marbling. It's a wet on wet technique. So there we have that. And then for the last cookie here, I'm just going to flood all of this white. I'm going to flood it white and create a nice backdrop for our bouquet of flowers. So get that icing on there. I'm going to use my toothpick. There we go. And we just completed the second step, which is flooding. And ideally, it's so good if we can give these cookies a couple minutes to just hang out and crust over a little bit and dry before we put on the finishing touches. So why don't you step away, press pause for about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and our cookies will be ready for the final step of detailing. See you in 5. All right, so our cookies have crusted over a little bit. You'll notice that they're not quite as glossy. They have a little bit more of a matte finish, so that means they're ready to go. So in case you need to rebag your icing because you've trimmed any of your bags a little too big, let's rebag those. Here's how we do that. You just want to open up one of the empty bags and fold it over a little bit. And then using the bag that you're wanting to put into a fresh bag, just cut off a real big snip of that bag, empty it into the new one, and while you're holding on tight to it, squeeze the icing out, and then you can tie a knot and start fresh. All right, and you can rebag any 2 icing colors you'd like. All right, I'm just going to rebag this one here. Maybe I'm going to do my green too, actually. I changed my mind, as I often do. Now with these final details, again, you just can take your ideas and run with it. I'm gonna do it one way, but I would love for you to use creative freedom and just do whatever you feel like doing. You are gonna be so proud of your cookies in the end. I know right now they don't look like very much, but they're gonna come to life in this step, I promise. So I'm just gonna snip off a little bit, even smaller on these snips, so I can do really fine details. Test it off to the side, make sure I'm happy with it. All right, looking good. So, one cookie I am going to start with is the bouquet, because it's gonna be a lot of like, do a little something, leave it. Do a little something, let it dry, come back to it. So we're gonna keep revisiting this one. So what I want you to imagine is that this whole top section is going to contain a lot of different flowers. And so using the different colors that you have, start to draw off some of those ideas. So I'm gonna make a flower over here. I'm kind of creating the petals. You can always push out your icing a little bit more to form it. And then we'll put a little center in it later. But for now, that's what I'm gonna do there. I want to add a little bit of all the different colors. So on this one, I'm going to draw it like that. I'm going to make a circle here, and we're going to add some petals to it in the end. In fact, I'm going to add another one here. We're going to add stems in the end to all of this too, but for right now, just start adding some color. Right now, they're looking a little bit like blobs, but they're going to come to life a little bit later. I just want these to all start kind of drying. Different levels too. Okay, so for now, I'm gonna leave this one and come back to it because I'm gonna add some stems later, okay? So, first one I'd like to tell you about is the flower. So, on this one, I'm gonna start in the middle and I'm gonna give it a little bit of a center. And I'm actually gonna add some sprinkles in this center, like the seeds in the center of the flower. Okay, and then I'm gonna give it this petal effect by taking that and then just really just try and fill in the spaces with a squiggly line. Just like that. Kind of gives it the illusion of you're looking at it and it's just opening up a little bit. All right. Now the birdhouse, it really could be done right now. One thing I like to do is I always think it's cute when there's an open area here to add a little something. So I'm going to add a heart because I love spring. So when I draw a heart, if it's not symmetrical, I just add a little more on both sides. So keep going until you're happy with the result. And I think that's where I'm gonna stop on that cookie. So I'm very gently going to move my cookies around. That way I can have my bird and my butterfly close by. I'm gonna see if I can keep my bouquet close by too, because I wanna keep adding things to that one. There we go. We're gonna squeeze 4 down here. This bird, I just am ready to bring him to life. Oops, that rolled right off. Okay, so very gently. I just tapped it in because the icing is still wet under there. You can just tap it in a little bit and it'll stick. And let's give him a beak. There's just a little triangle off to the side. There's that. Then we can create a wing for him too. So on the wing, I would say it almost could look like a teardrop. I think I'm gonna do this peach color too. I am going to somewhat follow the shape of the bird. So I really used the shape of this bird and made a smaller shape like that inside. Maybe like a paisley shape. You could put sprinkles on this wing if you'd like. I think what I'm gonna do is just put a few little polka dots on it. I think that would look cute. So I'm just gonna add some polka dots. Give it a pattern a little bit. There we go. Oh, he's cute. All right, let's talk about this butterfly. So in the center of the butterfly, I'm going to give it like a body. I wish I had paid attention more in my science class a long time ago, because I'm sure there's a name for this. Parts of the butterfly. I'm sure it's not made up of dots, but that's how I'm going to do this one. And this is where I suggest you use creative freedom. If you would like to make this butterfly come to life in a different way, oh, please just take it and run with it. Do whatever you're feeling inspired to do. Now, on this portion, I'm going to try to make my sides match. So I'm going to do this little outline like this. Maybe it looks like a spade. And I'm going to try to draw the same thing on both sides. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I did that, and then I'm going to draw another one inside. Butterflies have such amazing, intricate designs to them. And so let's do it on a cookie. Draw some cool designs. Now we'll do the bottom part. And this is just one of the many things you could be doing to your butterfly. So much potential for fun. And then I feel like I could just use a little bit of white somewhere. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a little bit of white polka dot, or some of my white sprinkles inside this butterfly. So I'm gonna create a little area inside of all of these sections and just add a little bit of my sprinkles. It's like playtime right now. You just play. I like to look at a cookie and think, what is it missing? What color would I like to incorporate? And with the sprinkles, I mean, you don't have to be precise. You're going to eat them, right? But if you really are taking pride in your work and you really want to slow down, try and just place your sprinkles just in that area. We could take this as seriously as we want it. There we go. I like it. All right, so my flowers, I know they're still drying. I'm not gonna add any of the centers to my flowers, but you know what I'm gonna do right now? I'm gonna add some stems. So what I want you to do is try and give them all a stem and join them in the center. You don't want all of your stems to end up in the same place. So they're gonna be beside each other, just as they would be in a bouquet. Because we're gonna draw a little bit of a, this line will be behind. We're gonna draw a bow on it, kind of like with a ribbon. It's being tied together, held together. Some of the stems, imagine, are behind the others. Okay. And we're still gonna let these dry because we're gonna add some little touches to the very tops of them. They need to dry a little bit more. So the rainbow. Here's what I'd like for you to do, is I want you to choose the colors. We've got 3 colors to work with if we have a white background. And I'm going to create one section that's a little bit wider. My peach I'm gonna make wider, and I'm just going to create a peach section on top of this rainbow, like so. The good thing about drawing it out by hand like this is if you notice there's any area that's like thinner or thicker where it should be, you can just go ahead and correct that. Just go back over it and fix it. Add on to it a little bit to make it match as best you can. And I'm gonna fill that in. And I'm gonna keep going with my colors but leaving some space in between. A little thicker of a space, maybe on some. Oh, you know what I'm gonna do here, because this bag is trimmed so nicely. It's really thin. Here's what I'm gonna do with this one. I'm gonna put some polka dots in this space here. Take my green, I'm going to make a band of the green. So mine is a little thinner on this side, so I'm just going to thicken it up a little bit, make it a little wider. And then flood that in. Isn't it neat how the cookies just come to life with these details? And I'm going to bring that peach color back in because it hasn't been used in a few sections here. And I think I'm going to make a dotted line right now. I just love to vary the pattern, and I just think it looks fun when there's a bunch of different things used. And why not? Cookie rainbows can look however you'd like. And then, since there's this one little space there, just like the birdhouse, I'm going to add a little heart. There we go. So there's the rainbow. Okay, so bouquet. I hope it is dried enough to be able to show you this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some little swirls. Tiny little swirls on top of these dots right now. It adds a little bit of texture, gives it a little something on top. Very hard to see on the small ones. You'll be able to see it bigger on the screen one. And same to the peach. Now on these smaller ones, okay, now here's where tweezers probably would come in handy, but we're not going to go that far. I am going to make some centers, and then we're going to use some of our white sprinkles. Now, we are going to use tiny. I think kids are going to have a lot easier time with this, but grown-ups, drop like 1 or 2 in the center. Oh my gosh, that one I fit 3 on. I like those with just 1. I think it looks cool with a couple or just 1. See what you can fit on there. I'm gonna put a little white dab on that one. And then to tie it all together, we're going to tie a little bow. Okay, so I'm gonna start right here. I'm gonna make 2 loops. And then a little swoop. And there, my friends, we have a bouquet of flowers. You guys did it. I think we got all of our finishing touches on here. I'm always sad when it's over, but good news. We love to make cookie kits. So we will always be coming up with new designs. All throughout the summer, we're going to have some fun new activities for you to work on with friends or family. And we would love it if you'd share your cookie designs with us. Snap a picture, tag us on social media. We'd love to take a look at what you've done. Right now, the best thing for you to do is to store your cookies in the box. They actually, in my opinion, taste so perfect the day after they dry. So if you want to wait, you can put them in the box. If you want to taste them now, you absolutely should and could. But ideally, letting them dry overnight just gives them the perfect taste. And they would be good in that box for 2 days. There's so much moisture in this icing that it can just sink down into the cookie and keep them fresh. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had fun, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.